Penguins 5, Rangers 2 from Madison Square Garden. I'm Matt Gajtka, and this is Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Also streaming on Facebook, also streaming on Twitter as well. At least the live version is, so you can chime in there. Wherever you comment, it'll pop right up alongside our beautiful faces here on the screen. Whatever device you may be using, you'll see them right there on the side. And I know that there's going to be plenty of chatter coming up over the next few days going into Monday's trade deadline. That seems to be always a peak of fan conversation around the NHL. So we'll get to that for sure. I do want to talk about what we think the Penguins' needs could be or should be, or what they should do tactically in terms of what they want to go after here in adding to this team before the playoffs. But I also want to discuss this series against the Rangers. The Penguins have played all 8 games. And also just recent play as the Pens avoided their first 3-game losing streak of the season. They've lost 2 in a row 3 separate times, but they haven't let it bleed over into 3. My guest tonight for the second time this year is Danny Shirey of the Pensblog. He's a hockey coach. He's also a hockey analyst on the Pensblog.com, also on Twitter, where you can find him at Shirey Irving. And Danny, you were saying before we pressed the record button, the game played out as expected. But you know what? After the 8 goals given up the other night, and after giving up 7 to the Bruins, well, 6 without the empty netter on Saturday afternoon, this was a relief, and this was a return to more what we've seen from the Penguins. So what stood out to you early on that allowed you to think that this was going to be a different kind of night for the Pens?
Well, right off the bat, I noticed that their forecheck was really giving the Rangers fits, and I think when the Penguins are really clicking, it's because of their forecheck. And I was noticing guys were taking smart routes to the Rangers when they were down in the corner trying to get the puck out. They're taking smart routes to them. They were angling them off the puck, and even if they weren't able to necessarily knock them off the puck right there, they were able to angle them off into the next layer of the forecheck so that they'd end up coughing the puck up there. So I don't necessarily want to say that the Penguins live and die by their forecheck, but it was certainly a big factor in getting them going early on.
I was just going to ask you that. You read my mind, Danny. Would the forecheck, though, be the defining element of the Mike Sullivan Penguins? If you look back on it after his tenure is over, whenever it happens, whether it's next year or 5 years or 10 years from now, is that the one thing you'll look at and you'll say that's what was the signature in terms of how they played under Sullivan?
Yeah, I think so. And I think after his first couple years there, everybody wanted to refer to them as the speed team, but I think it was less about how fast they were and more so how they were using their speed. And obviously, being fast doesn't make you a good forechecker, but utilizing your speed to your advantage when you're on the forecheck goes a long way.
And there's so much talk about defense, right? And you have a couple of games like the Penguins did. There should be talk about defense. 15 goals allowed, 14 of them with a goalie in the net. And it was just odd to see some backdoor tap-ins, some defensive zone coverages that were blown. But at the same time, isn't the most effective way to defend by defending in the offensive zone with the forecheck, defending in the neutral zone, and not even allowing the opportunity for teams to pick you apart? That's always been my feeling for about, 10 years or so, maybe even longer than that, ever since Dan Bilesma took over, basically, and turned the Penguins from a counter-attacking team under Michel Therrien to a team that was aggressive and tried to take the game to you. I've just believed in that, especially when you have the type of high-end talent that a team like the Penguins does. So when it comes to defending, how much of it is just not even allowing the other team to even be on the perimeter of your own zone?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge factor. And we, with the rise of analytics, we talk about all these guys that are good defensively, but it really means that they've got good defensive impact. So guys like Zach Aston Reese, who are, at the top of the charts in all these defensive metrics, it's not so much that he's so stingy in his defensive zone, is that he's really good at killing time at the other end of the ice. So, all these little things that he's doing to, keep plays alive in the offensive zone, making smart plays in the neutral zone. That's not to say that he's, a liability in the defensive zone, but a lot of these guys that we see that have these really good defensive impacts are just keeping the puck away from their zone.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it because I think when most fans consider defense, they think about stick on puck and preventing the opposing players from getting inside the hash marks in the scoring areas, the scoring chance zone, not allowing cross ring passes. That's all involved, and I think that's more of a penalty killing fundamental than it is necessarily something you want to be doing a lot of 5-on-5. So I think that a lot of fans and honestly commentators and people who follow the game and have followed the game for a long time could afford to change that perspective to the type of angle that you're talking about there. And we do have plenty of comments here from folks chiming in. We have on YouTube, Steeler Nation 412 says, great game, great win, especially after allowing the Rangers to score 8 on us. Can't wait to be in second place in the division. Doesn't it seem like we've been in third forever? Well, for a while there, Danny, the Penguins were threatening for first. That still could be possible here, but at the same time, when it comes down to it, you're just counting down the days until the Penguins can get into that playoff spot completely locked in. The Flyers have fallen off, so it's not looking as high leverage as we thought it would be at this point of the season, but that's at least my next milestone here for the Pens. Not necessarily seeding, but just get in because this has been a difficult ride. This division, I think, has played out as being maybe the most balanced at the top in the NHL. So that's where I'm at right now. What are you thinking about in terms of goals for the Penguins here in the final 15 games or so?
Yeah, I mean they're essentially a lock for the playoffs right now. I have a tough time, seeing the Flyers come back into the picture and maybe supplant them for that final spot. Obviously, you'd like to see the Penguins finish as high as they can, just in case they do end up making a deep run into the playoffs and getting that home ice. But at the end of the day, we've seen so many times that it doesn't even end up mattering. So as long as they're getting in, I'm going to be happy. I think if they can continue to play a relatively structured game down the line, that could go a long way. But and it might be a little bit different this year because it's a shorter season. But there's been years past where down the line, it's game 76 of the season. You already know you're making the playoffs. You might not show up. And at the end of the day, even if you're not getting those 2 points, that's how bad habits start to creep in. So I think they need to be vigilant down the stretch and be cognizant of keeping those good habits in place.
That's one thing that I've liked about this season is just the enhanced urgency. A 2-game losing streak in an 82-game regular season, it's hard to really get any kind of panic mode type of emotion ginned up over it. But in a season like this, 2 games feels more like 3 or even close to 4. So to have the Penguins put a stop to that, and also at least get the edge on a Rangers team that's playing a lot better. Not that the Rangers are going to surge into the playoffs or anything like that. It's still possible, but they're an extreme long shot at this point. But the Rangers at periods of time over the course of the season, Danny, haven't they looked like they have maybe not had the Penguins' number, but they've given the Penguins more trouble than a team that is in 6th or 7th place in a division might normally do.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. And it seems like, and it might just be the influx of young talent they have there, but it seems like the Rangers more so than other teams I don't think they're great at getting sustained pressure in the offensive zone, but they're really good at breaking the Penguins down off the rush. And, like you were talking about, we've seen some of those backdoor tap-ins that the goalie didn't have a chance on, right? So we've seen a lot of that against the Rangers, and I'm not exactly sure what to chalk that all up to.
From my perspective, the Rangers play with a lot of pace. Like you said, they thrive on the rush goals, and we've seen it this past 2 months almost for the Rangers, maybe call it 6 weeks. When they get it rolling, they can really fill the net. So I'm a little bit scared of them going into the future here.
Can't hear you, Matt. Can't hear you. Can you hear me okay? Still nothing.
How's that?
There we
Check.
go. There we go.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to lose the mic. Mike is overloading everything. What I was trying to spit out there was that I think the Rangers, due to that speed and that youth, they give the Penguins more of an issue because they're able to match the speed at which the Penguins like to play. So, in my view, if you look into the playoffs here, a team like maybe Washington, maybe a little bit heavier, maybe the Bruins as well, more deliberate. Perhaps there could be a situation where the Penguins actually have a matchup edge against teams like that, and young, quick teams like the Devils and the Rangers might give them more trouble than you would imagine.
Yeah, and I think a big part of the Rangers as well is they've got Adam Fox back there who loves jumping up in the rush and kind of leading the puck up ice. And he's been so shifty, and it seems like every time the Rangers are scoring that he was on the ice or involved in the play in some way. And he's going to be trouble for a long time. He's only in his second year, and I already consider him a top 5 or 10 D-man in the league. So, as guys like Lafreniere and Kakko and even Hedel and Vitaly Kravtsov, as they continue to develop, they're going to be something.
Yeah, Kravtsov making his debut this week. What are your thoughts on Alexei Lafreniere? Because the first few times I saw him, he didn't jump off the screen, certainly. And there were moments, certainly, as well, mixed in with that. But at the same time, I think he's looking better, and I think he's looking more confident because from watching the clips of him in the Quebec League last year, I was expecting a guy to come in, maybe not necessarily be at a Crosby or Malkin or Ovechkin level, but to be an impact player from the jump. I didn't see that the first 20-some games, but this could be more of a traditional rookie learning curve, couldn't it be?
Yeah, no doubt. And I was like you when he was coming in. I thought, probably not at that Crosby or Ovechkin level, but I thought he might be hanging around, that point per game pace or maybe a little bit below that. But I definitely agree with you that he didn't, look very impressive to me the first few weeks of the season. But he definitely seems to be a little bit more confident now. But I think it might be, a little bit more of a slow burn with him. Some of those highlight reel goals that we saw from, the World Junior tournaments and everything like that. Those kinds of moves don't work in the NHL. And, it might just take a little bit more time with him.
All right, enough about the Rangers. We're talking Penguins here on Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Love the comments coming in. Gooey on Twitter says Danny has way better hair than the guy on the left. That's a hurting thing to say. Unbelievable. Shamey's wearing that hat. Great analysis, though. Thanks, Gooey. We appreciate the input. And Walt Flanagan also shows up, as he usually does, on YouTube. Just glad to get a win after those trash games. He didn't watch tonight, but you know what, Walt? We're not going to talk a ton about this game or the last two games just because of the looming trade deadline, which is Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And Danny, I'm just tired of the thought that the Penguins should just tinker with this team. For me, you look for a legit hockey trade where you can add an impact player. I would prefer another dynamic forward, for instance, for the top two lines and help the depth from the top down way just to, push guys down that maybe could be even better in more limited roles. And I would rather backfill with depth guys from the system, from a player like Frederick Gaudreau or Radim Zohorna, who scored another goal. Probably should have had 2 tonight, but Igor Shesterkin robbed him in the third period. Let's talk about Zohorna, though, before we address that big picture thing, because he looks a little gangly out there, not exactly maybe your ideal player for the system, quote unquote. But at the same time, I think he gives the Penguins something they don't really have, namely size and also an ability to get right to the net. As we've seen, he's pretty fearless when it comes to taking it to the goal, isn't he?
Yeah, no doubt. I think he had, 3 or 4 looks that were right in front of the crease today. So he definitely knows where to go to put the puck in the back of the net. But I've been extremely impressed with his skating as well. Like very few guys with his size skate that well and move around that well. And I actually did a video breakdown of his goal a little bit ago. And what the sequence started with the Penguins making a line change. He's coming off the bench, And a lot of the time when guys are coming off the bench, you'll see them dart straight through the neutral zone to the far blue line and just hang out waiting for the defenseman or the center to carry the puck up ice. But as soon as he got off the bench, he got deep into the defensive zone and built up with the play. And it allowed him to kind of escape traffic. None of the Rangers really marked him. And, he was able to build speed, made a great pass reception on his backhand in transition, and then just made a power move to the front of the net. So I think he's definitely got some tools to be able to help the Penguins.
I hadn't heard much of him before the season, too. It's just funny how guys can slot in, and maybe it's adrenaline at first, but I think there's something to the Zohorna thing. I also think there's something to the Gaudreau thing, too. And we saw him excel at the absolute highest level of the sport. 2017 Stanley Cup Final, he scored 3 goals against the Penguins. How do you figure a guy like that goes from that spot where, yeah, he was filling in and the Predators were depleted by injuries up front? That's part of the reason why he's there. But clearly he had the ability to do something at this level, not just score, but contribute all over the ice. How do you think a guy like that goes from that level to AHL for a couple of years and is available for the Penguins to sign in the offseason?
Well, I guess we can look to Vancouver and Jim Benning re-signing Tanner Pearson to a 3-year deal as he's 28 years old and basically a marginal middle six player. So who knows why GMs are passing on particular players or whatever. But I've been extremely impressed with Gaudreau. I'm adamant that he can slot in as their 4th line center. And we even saw tonight when Crosby had to leave the ice, Gaudreau was the guy that was centering Gensel and Rust. So, we've seen some flashes of the hands that he has. I'm not convinced that he's gonna be a guy that's gonna put up a ton of points. But he's been great on the penalty kill. He's an astounding forechecker, and he skates pretty well too. And that all goes hand in hand. So the Penguins definitely got a little diamond in the rough, if you will.
And what did you think about my grander statement there as I led into this topic as far as what the Penguins could use? I'm always in favor of going for a big move when you have the opportunity to win a Stanley Cup, and I think the Penguins do still with Crosby, and we hope that Malkin's able to come back. They still have Chris Letang. It seems like the goaltending has been figured out for the most part. I don't want to speak too soon, but knock on wood on that. And on defense, they appear to be, I don't want to say stacked, but it's a very deep unit right now when they're healthy. Certainly it is. So where would you look if you're Ron Hextall and Brian Burke, if you had to have a wish list here for the trade deadline? Like I said, just 4 days away now.
Yeah, obviously you'd love for them to make a move for a guy that's going to be an impact player. I think that their best route is probably looking for a middle six winger, because I know Kasperi Kapanen was building some chemistry with Malkin before they both got hurt. I'm still not convinced on him as necessarily a top 6 guy. So maybe a guy that could slot in with Malkin or Crosby, because I don't think that Crosby, Rust, and Gensel is anything that you necessarily have to keep together. So I definitely think they're fine down the middle. So I think they really need to look to use or move one of their surplus defensemen to try and bring in somebody that can drive a little bit of offense on the wing in a middle six role.
Who do you think is redundant on the blue line? I've brought up Marcus Pettersson a few times. I'm not picking on him, but I'm just looking at the group as it is and seeing A, who has a contract that if you moved it would free up some space, and also B, who would have value around the league and isn't someone like a Chris Letang who has a no trade. And obviously, if you're trading a Chris Letang, then you're thinking you're not as close to the Stanley Cup as you hope.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if they're going to move a defenseman, I'd probably be looking at moving Pettersson. There's certainly worse options to have back there, but he hasn't developed as much as I had hoped, and he just kind of seems meh to me. He seems average. He shows flashes every once in a while, like on Zohorna's goal tonight. He made a great breakout pass to him. So he does have, those flashes, but I have not seen anything, that says this is a guy that they need to necessarily keep around.
And that's the feeling I've had there too. And what do you think about the goaltending? Why do you think, that Casey DeSmith, we'll start with him, has he taken a step in your eyes as you watch him play? Does he look better than he did 2 years ago? Or is this the case of a guy who once again is thrust into maybe more of a role than the Penguins initially planned and doing quite well with it?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the season when him and Jari were both faltering and everybody was worrying about picking up another goalie, I was fine with sticking with DeSmith because I don't think he's going to go out and win a Vezina and steal Jari's role from him, but he's been solid time and time again in all of his NHL appearances. Or over the course of his NHL appearances, I think he's hanging out around like a 920 save percentage and 70 some appearances. So, it's certainly a luxury to have a backup that, you can count on for some games.
And Jari, he's still way down the list when you look at goals saved above average and some of the advanced stats, and also the traditional stats like just plain old regular save percentage. But do you feel like his recent turn in form is representative of something real there?
I think we touched a little bit on this last time you had me on, because I think it was at the beginning of the stretch when he was starting to turn it around. So I think Jari might have a little bit more of a limited ceiling than some of the other top goalies around the league. But he's going to be susceptible to those blow up games. When he's off his game, he stays way too deep in his crease, and teams are able to just pick him apart. But every goalie has those things when they're off where pucks are just blowing by them. So I think it's just a matter of the Penguins getting him hot at the right time rather than, hoping that he's reached some level that he's going to stay at.
I do notice the situation that you're talking about where if he's not feeling confident or maybe he's gotten a couple goals get by him, he does tend to sink back. Stopped the penalty shot tonight against Chris Kreider, and there were moments that looked like the Jari of the couple of weeks before he got injured and allowed DeSmith to once again pique my interest in terms of how high is his ceiling really. So it's an interesting situation with the goalies right now, but at least we can agree they don't really need to add anything to that part of the lineup. Brett Stella makes an interesting point on YouTube. He says, you have to keep in mind about the Seattle expansion draft, which I do keep forgetting about. But yes, the Seattle Kraken are coming in the fall. Because when you think about trading players, then you trade a guy and then you still have to expose other players coming up. So perhaps the best way to move a player like Pearson is to just leave him exposed there. But that also raises the thought that, well, how urgent is it to make a move this year? How close to closing do you think this championship window is? Those are all really difficult questions. Those are all big money questions that Hextall and Burke are, I'm sure, noodling over and have been since they took over. So if you had to rate the urgency of this season, where would you put it? Do you think that there is a great urgency right now to try to maximize at this very moment in this odd season? But they're still going to hand out a Stanley Cup at the end of it, and after 10 years, we're going to look back and say, yeah, that was one of those weird years. But we're not going to take away the Lightning's Cup from last year. It's certainly unfair to even think along those lines.
Right. I'm putting the urgency at a 10. I'm putting it at a 10. Crosby's 33. He's going to be 34 later this year. If you wait another year and say, maybe we'll stand pat and just hope and maybe not go for broke this year. Next year, when, the Cup finals rolling around, Crosby's going to be pushing 35. Malkin's going to be 36. And yeah, these guys are generational talents and they're still at least near the top of their games. But how much longer can we really bank on that? How much longer can they really be a dynamic 1-2 punch?
Yeah, it's a question that's probably unanswerable. And I think it's also odd to look at this season and next season and the season after that and just continually tick down the championship chances because you don't know how things are going to play out. And, of course, injuries, as we're seeing again, Malkin and Kapanen, who knows how they're able to jump back into the lineup and hopefully recapture that form. But it's getting pretty late here. I know it's this is typically the week that the playoffs do start, but we have about 5 weeks to go before the Stanley Cup playoffs do get going, barring any kind of crazy COVID development. And when you talk to the Vancouver Canucks, anything's possible, of course. But it is looking like we're on track for that second week of May. start of the playoffs. And of course, trade deadline talk is certainly in line with that. Power play for you, not much of an impact on tonight's game necessarily, but it has appeared to be at least more direct and have a better idea of where it's going with the puck without Yevgeny Malkin available. And I realize that's where people's thoughts go instantly. That's where my thought goes instantly is, why can't you do 2 power play units? Or maybe you just, it's ridiculous. You're not going to not play Malkin on the top unit. But I have to admit, it does look better tactically. So are you seeing that same thing? And do you think there's a way to recreate that type of directness that the Penguins power play has right now with Malkin back in the lineup? Or is it going to be like it always is, where everyone's got to have a touch on the puck and nothing much happens in the end?
Yeah, I mean, when Malkin's in the lineup, they run the power play through him and Letang. But now that he's out, they've been running it through McCann. And what McCann has been doing is that when Letang's got the puck at the point, McCann will go from like the half wall up to the blue line and then cut really sharp back up the left wing. And he receives a pass, so he's got momentum going toward, the front of the net. And he's got an option to rip a shot, and we've seen him score like that, 2, 3, 4 times this year already. But it also brings the defender's eyes to him. So if Gensel or Rust are sitting on the back door, they can kind of get lost in traffic for McCann to find them. So I've loved the way they've been running the power play through him lately. But that's obviously susceptible to change when Malkin gets back.
We have a couple minutes left here, Danny, before I let you go and we say goodbye for the night. What have you thought about the season as it's been structured, with the 2-game series, with the limited travel, exclusive play within the division? We're hearing a lot of talk, mainly pushed by, we'll call them Canadian voices, that maybe we should have more divisional games and the Canadian teams should all play each other more. And no one cares about the Penguins versus the Anaheim Ducks. I would push back on some of that because I think variety is important. And even though we can all watch the NHL's best on a variety of platforms now, ESPN Plus is coming up next season, but as of right now, you have NHL.tv, you have NHL Center Ice if you have it, there are social media highlights, NHL Network. I get it. I understand that you don't have to watch Connor McDavid play the Penguins to appreciate Connor McDavid's talent, but I still want to see Connor McDavid play the Penguins. I still want to see, heck, the Canucks. I want to see all the teams in the league play the Pens, because I think as a fan of one team primarily, or as an observer of one team primarily, you get to know a team best when they're going up against the team that you know the best. So that's my perspective on it. So I wouldn't necessarily lean too heavily into the divisional stuff, but I have like the 2-game series aspect, and I hope they can carry that over. How would you structure the NHL schedule, assuming we're back to normal next year? Would you take anything from this season and carry it forward?
I definitely don't think that we need any more divisional games. As great as it's been having all these rivalry games, I'm sick of watching everybody in the East Division. I'm just sick of it. I do really like the series. Those make for some pretty interesting storylines. And if guys get heated at the end of a game and then they're playing 36 hours later or whatever it may be, that creates some pretty interesting storylines. But the interesting thing about this season, and I'm as big a hockey nut as there is, I'll watch the Coyotes and Kings play if nothing else is going on. But my interest in watching other teams this year has been extremely minimal, and I don't know why. If that's just because the Penguins haven't been playing them, and I've been keeping up with it, but I haven't found the same urge to turn on that Coyotes and Kings game, for instance. So I definitely keep the series going forward, but I want to see Crosby and McDavid play.
All right, last thing here. There are some names being thrown about in the comments section. Brett Stella mentions Ryan Getzlaf of the Anaheim Ducks, certainly a name that would pique many people's interest. Also, Scott Lawton from the Philadelphia Flyers. And over on Twitter, don't want to lose it, Clem says that he thinks they might end up getting Nick Foligno cheapish because he might not want to go far from home. Of course, Foligno's been with the Columbus Blue Jackets for a while, and it looks like the Jackets are going to miss out on the playoffs, and Torts isn't going to be back, and it's going to be a total paradigm shift perhaps in Columbus. So out of those 3 names, which one tickles your fancy the most? Lawton, Getzlaf, or Foligno?
this is going to kill me to say because I'm not a fan of him at all, but probably Foligno. And I'll tell you, it's less about him and more so to do with the other guys. So Lawton, I like him as a third line center, and he can actually play the wing as well. But I'm not so sure that the Penguins would acquire him to play wing, and I don't think they need another center. So I'm staying away from Lawton. And I'm staying away from Getzlaf for the same reason. He's obviously still a guy that can contribute, even though he's 35 years old. He can still drive offense, but the problem is he's been doing that at center, and he's not much of a goal scorer, and he doesn't shoot the puck a lot. So I'm assuming if they went after him, he'd probably be playing right wing on the second or third line. And I don't want a guy that's, afraid to shoot the puck or not going to put the puck in the back of the net a whole lot. So I'm going to go with Foligno. I think, like I said, I'm not a big fan of the guy by any means, but I definitely think he could be a pretty solid contributor to the Penguins' third line.
I'll admit Getzlaf certainly got my antenna up. The Ducks are looking to move some players, and it may not take that much capital, I suppose, to acquire Ryan Getzlaf at this stage of the game. And he does give them a different element with the big body, and like you said, not a shooter, certainly, and would probably have to play out of position. So maybe that is a non-starter for the Penguins. Last comment, which will set the tone for the end of the show, from Matt Popchuk on Twitter. He says the Pens came out like the proverbial house on fire and did a pretty good job keeping up that tempo. A much different team from the past two games. That's my takeaway. I know that the Pens only got 2 out of 4 from the Rangers, but they end the series much better than they started it. And at this time of the year, your most recent game can certainly tell you a lot, and each one of these games counts for more, as we all know, in the 56-game slate. We hope we get to 56 games. Danny, great show. I loved having you on, and I hope to have you on again if you are so agreeable to do that, either late in the regular season or once we get going in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a blast. I'd be happy to join you anytime.
And the proverbial plug, I want to give you that chance as well. You're on Twitter at Shirey Irving. Anything you're working on for Pensblog or any recent work that you'd like to highlight?
Nothing that I'm working on right now. If you guys want to check out, about a week ago, I wrote an article on Jared McCann and the improvements he made to his skating, and how that's kind of led to his breakout season. Other than that, I started doing video breakdowns of, Penguins goals, and I'll move on to other highlights as well. But they're short, like 2-minute clips. I've just been tweeting them out. So if you guys want to go over to my Twitter profile and check those out, that'd be awesome.
All right. And Danny Shirey, one of our cradle of coaches here on Pittsburgh Postgame. It's been great to talk to him. Conrad Waite, Greg Revac as well. A couple of guys from Ohio. I mentioned this last time Danny was on, but we're mining the Buckeye State heavily here. And John Smith mentions, in addition to thanking us for the show, thank you for watching, John. 6-2-0 against the Rangers. As much as I may talk about how the Rangers give the Pens some issues, the Penguins certainly didn't look like it when you just break it down head-to-head. And points acquired and points lost. It was a pretty good result against a team that's still rebuilding in the Rangers. But I would say more interesting than most in the East Division. Once we get back to the Metro, more interesting than most in the Metro Division too. For Danny Shirey of thepensblog.com, I'm Matt Gajtka of Pittsburgh Sports Live and various other projects. You can find me on Twitter at Matt Gajtka. My name is right below. Gajtka is how you spell that scintillating surname. We'll talk to you next time on Pittsburgh Postgame.